let's start with unemployment. 3.5% for June, still close to 50-year lows. So it's increasingly raising a dilemma for the Reserve Bank that's projected the jobless rate to rise in the face of 12 interest rate rises it's already handed out. The problem is that if labour markets are undersupplied, then wages naturally should rise, supply and demand, right? And that's inflationary, so it puts pressure on rates to rise further. But so far, wages haven't risen to such an extent that it's worrisome for inflation. And there's a reason for that that's seen in this week's numbers. Australians, you see, are working harder than at almost any time in their history. More hours per week, more people with more than one job, more women than ever in the workforce. In other words, if people can't get a big enough pay rise, they're finding other ways to get money. The gig economy, more than two-income households. The Bureau of Statistics, Bjorn Jarvis, explained it to us this week.
So that's not just telling us that there's more people in employment, but there's also more people working longer hours in employment than they would usually be doing. And that's something that we've actually seen as a very consistent trend.
And this makes the concept of full employment hard for the Reserve Bank or anybody to work out. It's generally called the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, or the NAIRU. This is the point where employment is in perfect balance. Everybody who wants a job has got one, but there's no wages inflation because of a shortage of workers. Now, what's clear is with an unemployment rate of 3.5%, Australia's labour market is undersupplied. That might eventually be alleviated by more migration or higher unemployment. But in the meantime, the pressure is for wages to rise, and that'll continue. And that's why there's still a bias for higher interest rates in Australia. The Reserve Bank says unemployment will rise. That's its forecast from its latest monetary policy statement back in May. And the incoming governor of the Reserve Bank, Michele Bullock, says unemployment has to rise to get markets back in balance.
We are hoping that we can bring inflation down a bit more gradually, keep inflation expectations anchored, and keep at least the unemployment rate will have to rise, but hopefully not. We think actually it was probably the unemployment rate was above the NAIRU before the pandemic. We think there was lots of evidence that suggested that it could come lower. 4.5 probably looks, we think, maybe in the ballpark.
So to work out why this definition of full employment is so important, but also so elusive, let's bring in Dr. Leonora Rees, Senior Lecturer in Economics at RMIT University, who specialises in labour economics and gender equality. Leonora, many thanks for your time. First up, why can nobody put their finger on the exact number of full employment, the NAIRU, if you like?
Well, hi, Ross. Great to join you to talk about this topic. Yes, so NAIRU is this measurement of what's the lowest rate of unemployment that we can achieve without also finding ourselves in a situation where inflation is rising. And it's elusive because we don't know we don't know that we're going to reach it until we actually do reach it. So it's a bit like a game of limbo, going under the bar. You don't know how low you can go until you hit the bar. So at the moment, we're looking at unemployment at 3.5%, and we have high inflation. And what NAIRU is referring to is what's the lowest unemployment rate that we can achieve without seeing that inflationary pressure. So we are at a state where the economy is really strong. There's high spending, there's high demand. That's great for job opportunities. But at the same time, we have excess demand over supply, and that's putting pressure on prices. So it suggests that we may need to tolerate a slightly higher level of unemployment to bring down those inflationary pressures. And so that's what we mean by that NAIRU measurement. We don't know yet what that exact number will be.
OK, but then isn't there some way in which economists can try and work it out? I mean, there's Phillips curves that you have and all sorts of things. Isn't there something you can do to say, right now it's 4.2% or 4.5% or 3.8%? Isn't there something?
Yes, economists are doing their best to look at the data and to estimate and to understand these relationships. What happens when we see inflation go up? How much will unemployment increase or decrease. So economists are analysing the data to look at that. What's really difficult is that there are a lot of other moving pieces in the economy at the moment. So Nauru is very much based on demand going up and down. It's assuming that we have these fluctuations in spending where people are really confident, or we have these slumps in demand where there's a decline in confidence in the economy. It's really hard to also factor in when we have these shocks on the supply side, which is what we've been going through in the last few years with the pandemic. We've had these global supply chain interruptions, and that's also contributed to inflation going up. So those Nauru models don't always account for that. They can't always predict what will be the effect of supply side shocks in terms of pushing inflation up and how quickly those supply side shocks will dissipate. So that throws a spanner into the works. The other big thing that's moving around a lot in our labour market is that unemployment really refers to whether or not people have a job. You're employed or you're not. But we know that for a lot of people, what matters for them is also how many hours they're working. So you could be employed, but you're not working as many hours as you want to work. And we call that underemployment. You might be working more jobs, multiple jobs, not just one job, to get by when there's a really high cost of living and household bills are going up. So we also know that we have this measurement of labour force involvement, labour force activity, which is not simply a neat unemployment number. It's also a matter of hours of work and people looking for more hours than they might have. So that also makes these calculations of Nauru a little more complicated.
Many thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Russ, for having me.